expect them to do the same thing. So I can't always jump up and down and holler and scream and, make everything a serious issue, although it could be serious, but I have to put him in a position where he always feel like that whenever something goes wrong, we're going to talk about it. And then we're going to come to a decision to what we could have done versus what we did, what we should do the next time this happens. And then that's where they develop their critical thinking skills. That's teaching them accountability. It's teaching them to understand that your impact is not only about you. When we see these young guys going out here murdering and killing, they have no thoughts about anything else but that instant. And I know from working with them in the jail, it's not them being big-time gangsters, is that they have an inherent fear that if they don't kill the other person, that person is going to kill them. And often that's the truth. And so it's this thing that we call in counseling called cognitive dissonance. And that means that they have no real perception of a reality. And they don't. Everything is sort of like a game with them. It's like, hey, I'm going to do over here, I'm going to do this. I never forget one day I was in DC jail and I was trying to teach a math course and the guys just wouldn't get it. So one guy wanted to be a jokester and make jokes and cut up because he was attention seeking. And when I went to talk to him about this didn't make sense and it wasn't timely, he told me, man, I will whoop your behind. He said, my mother taught me how to fight. And all me and my two brothers, we fought. And my mother would let us fight in the house until somebody won. And so, man, we always felt like we could whoop anybody. I think I could whoop you. I don't know about all that, but I said, I don't want you to know is that, did that really make sense to you right now? He said, no, all my brothers, we did that. So I said, well, you locked up here in D.C., where are your brothers at? Well, one is locked up in Anne Arundel County, the other one's locked up in Montgomery County. So I looked at him in the face. I said, so let's do the math. See, how did all that fighting really become sensible to you? What was the real benefit when now you only fighting the clock because you locked down? This brother broke down and cried because he never thought of it that way. He thought of it that he had to have this defense of being hard and tough. And he didn't get the love that he needed to be able to have him understand that sometimes you can't win every battle. But you can outthink people and you can come to a place that you can learn where you can limit and draw the box around yourself so you can always be safe. So when we think of restorative parenting, we're thinking of we want to be loved and we want love to be shared in a household. I was raised by my grandparents. Their thinking of love was that I had 3 meals a day and a bed, but they never hugged me. They never told me they loved me. And so that challenged me to learn, again, when I had my kids, to always make sure that my children understood without me just showing them, but me telling them, me communicating with them that I love them. And then being able to listen to them to go through their situations. And that's sort of transposed into a way that now they're adults. Sometimes I feel like they want to talk to us too much. So me and my wife have to sort of, bring it down. But again, we have to be restorative in our parenting to always have our children and our grandchildren know that at any cost, at any mistakes, that we're going to love the hell out of them because they're ours. So that's what restorative parenting is. And so we've got to start instituting that because we got to look at our boys and see what are they navigating. Anybody ever heard of the school to prison pipeline? It's real.
Sure.
We have over 25% in this area of our students that graduate from high school and go straight to prison. It hinders me. I struggle with when I look at all these graduations, when I attend graduation, and people are looking at these boys saying that, man, you're 18, you're a man now. You got to get a job and get on out of here. And they have no skills. They have no knowledge. They have no support system to carry them into their future. And I'm not saying everybody has to go to college, because that's not always a reality for some of our boys and girls. But yet the reality is that we ought to be able to walk with them. We have to give them that hand to have them to find their way and be able to be successful in whatever it is that they're doing. And then not turn them over to the world and think that the world is going to teach them anything, because what the world is going to teach them is not going to be worth nothing as they go forward. Negative narratives do damage. When we talk to them in a negative way and we beat them down, I'm working in the educational system and doing crisis counseling in a school. One of the mottos that I always share with parents is that you tame them and you don't shame them. He's just too strong. He just always, hey, that's a leadership skill. But I got to nurture that into a way that they can learn how to modify that and make that work for them and not work against them. And if you're an educator, when you're in the educational system, you talk down to these boys and you make them think that they're nothing or they cannot be successful. And we know right now that education is problematic. Education is problematic. We have third through fifth graders that can't even write today, can't even read. But then we have an expectation with all the trauma and the things that are impacting their lives that they're going to come to school and sit down and learn every day. Do the math. It just does not make sense. So as educators, we got to find a way to break that bridge, build those relationships, and have them understand that, one, we care about them, and then we can teach them. You'll never, this lady that did a TED talk, and her name just skips my mind. She said, the kids never learn from nobody that they don't like. And so we got to get that love. And when we can get that love, and we can get that understanding with them, and we can establish boundaries, then we can turn around and say that, hey, you may not be the best at this, but let's do the best you can do to be successful. So when they constantly hear that they're dangerous, that they're difficult, that they're too much, and that, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do with you in this classroom, then guess what they do? They make the mess because they don't want to learn. So if I don't want to learn, then I could sit in a teacher's classroom and say, look, okay, first watch Johnny over there. Johnny's gonna say something stupid, then Billy's gonna say something stupid, and then Sam is gonna say something stupid, and then they've taken up 15, 20 minutes of educational time because they don't want to learn. But if we can find a way to meet them where they at and bring them to where we want to go independently, because it may not always go the same way, but we have to find a way to bridge them into education and make it enjoyable and make it something palatable that they feel like that they can grasp and hold on to. That's just the way. I mean, and I've been in education over 30 years. I wish it was like when I first got there and I can tell the kids to do what I say and you'll be successful. It just doesn't work no more. And if you think about it, in 50 years, education hasn't changed, but society has changed. And that's the same thing in terms of parenting. And that's why I think this is a good model for us to move into restorative parenting. When we think about the navigating, our homes have to be different. They have to become healing narratives that, and I know this is tough. We have a lot of single parents that's trying to provide food, that's trying to provide safety, that's trying to provide clothes and keep their kids moderately effective. But we've got to change the narrative. One thing that me and my wife always did, we were always, able to do well, but we'd always tell my son, especially, he always wanted shoes, he played basketball. He wanted the best shoes. And back when he was a kid, like $30 was, you could get a good pair of shoes back in that day. And I would always tell him that it's not that I can't afford $100 pair of shoes, but it just didn't make sense, and have him understand why it didn't make sense. Because if I get you $100 pair of shoes, then we're going to have to eat hot dogs for the rest of the month. And it's those kind of things that our children, as they learn to grow, that they'll understand better than saying, you stupid, you a fool. Where do you think I'm going to spend all that money from? And then guess what they do? They go out and find other ways to create money and opportunities to get those things. So we got to change in the navigation of the change and the things that we want to see in the lives of our boys. We got to make home become that greater place of communication. And I want to say that when they come in from school, it has to be more than just, how was your day? Or it was okay. And then that's it. So what happened in math? What are you learning? Are you struggling with that? Did you read your spelling words? Did you write your sentences? Okay, let me look at those. Let me see what you're doing. That we have to be actively a part of it to have them understand, what it is that they should be doing, and that we really care about those things. Listen, boys are, even though they want to be these tough knuckleheads, they just want sometimes for us to care. And sometimes they put on a look like, I don't want you, Mr. Thompson. No, and then they turn a corner. They want Mr. Thompson to give them a hug because sometimes they don't get a hug at home. And so hug your kids, love them, understand that they're going through things in their world. Some of the educators is teaching them they're going through things in their world. There's so much going on in the world for them to get from home to school, the dangers involved, and all of those kind of things. We got to make sure we clear and that we understand and that they know that we understand. When we think of our boys, we got to think of systematic racism. That's just the way that it is. Over policing, harshness of discipline. I get this all the time in the building, and on my end, the women just think that I'm just not tough enough. They think that I'm just too soft on these boys, and where I'm trying to build a relationship with them to then I can get to the gist of what their issue is, and then help them think through how they can make this different the next time. They're negative stereotypes. They impose this on each other consistently because they think that that's the way to make them better. If I can talk down about him, I want to make him feel bad about himself. But I found that when I do restorative circles with them, they end up laughing because they find out they have more in common than they have against each other. And that's important. Toxic masculinity. This is a big one. And I touched on it a little bit when I talked about with my son. You're not supposed to cry. If you cry, you're a sucker. You know, hey, you got to wear your pants down like that because that's just the style. They're just particular things that they can't colors. Like you notice now, all of them like to wear black hoods and black pants, and it's 90 degrees outside. They blacked out. And I know they hot, but that's something that makes them feel more like a man. And that's what society is telling them. And so when you as a parent, when you notice those things that are coming into your house that you're seeing are a greater part of society, just don't accept them, but question them and challenge them to really think about why they adopting these things when they're not the most healthiest thing for them. And then what they're identifying with is something that can actually lead them into another point of danger because a lot of the gang mentality is in that kind of stuff. And so they're adopting it because they think it's cool, but then we got to help them think through that process. And then this is a very important one that I had to learn to deal with myself is intergenerational trauma. Like I said, my grandparents raised me. My grandfather came from a place in Charlotte Courthouse, Virginia that was about big as your living room. My grandmother comes from Reedsville, North Carolina, another small city, tobacco city. And they came here and they created families. But again, their love for me was 3 hots and a cot. So as long as I had clothes, shoes, food, that was them showing their love. When God had given me a spirit that I needed intimacy. I wanted to be touched. I wanted to have people to listen to me and feel me. So I ended up going to the world and getting it. And thank God that I was delivered out of that. But what I'm saying is that was that intergenerational trauma. They came out of a place where racism was big and where I had to telling me I had to be 2 to 3 times better than the other cultures to be able to be successful, that if I didn't do A, B, and C, I was going to end up not being anything. And that was being imposed in my life. And I have a sister that's 11 months older than me. And one night as adults, we were able to just sit down and talk about all of that weight that had been put upon us and how we were able to free ourselves up by discussing what we had experienced in our development. And through that, we were able to understand that I couldn't blame my grandparents because they just didn't know no better. But what we had to do was find out that was not an issue that we should be carrying, that we were grateful that they did the best that they could, that we could make it. But now we got to pick up ourselves and make better decisions about our lives so we can do better. And I'm saying that's the same thing about our kids. If economically, if we're not rich and we can't do, we got to be honest about that and have our kids understand that we're doing the best we can as a parent, not shaming them or talking down to them, telling them and cussing them out about what we can't do and they need to get it for themselves. We need to talk about those things. And then we can release that trauma that goes, your dad's not here. My parents were divorced when I was 3. I didn't really see my father again until I was 15, 16 years old. But was that his problem? Was that my problem? It was both of our problems. But when I came to adopt that and say that that's the way that it was, and I don't know why, but the bigger thing was that I had to learn how to move through that. And then here's the big deal, not impose that on my kids, not have them experience the trauma that I went through because that's not fair to them. And a lot of times we do that in dysfunctional families, which is what my book is about, is just that I had to really be restored myself as an individual. And then with my wife working with me, we were able to change our narratives of our experiences, negative and positive, whatever they were, and put them in a way that now we could raise 3 healthy children. And so we can't let those traumas from our generational past become our present. And we have to find a way to overcome those things. And that's what I mean about the healing that has to take place. And not to necessarily get off point, but like when I see all of these people that claim that they're mentoring and they're working with boys to make them really different. If I take a kid and put them in a gym with a basketball, and they may not shoot anybody, I'll end up with a very good basketball player, but I'll probably still end up with a broken young man. You hear what I'm saying? If I take him, and I've done this and work with them with photography and different skills and talents, but if I'm not giving them the healing process, they're going to have that skill, but they're still going to be broken. And when that comes into their next relationship, that hopefully when they move to get married or they want to have kids, they're going to carry that intergenerational trauma, that experience that they had into the lives of their children. And then we just perpetuate the same thing over and over again. I love my grandparents. Now, do I always agree with what they did and how they raised me? No. But then on the other side, I had to come to the conclusion that they did the best they could with what they had. And so I'm trying to do the same thing with mine. Create opportunities. Do you have a safe place in your house? Do you have a safe words? Sometimes we can get so frustrated. We need to develop safe words to be able to understand that, hey, this may not be the right time to talk about this, but I'm going to give you 10 or 15 minutes to de-escalate, to come down, to work through your place. And then you can come to me and use words. Because when we learn how to use empathy, when we learn how to use active listening, when we learn how to just love on our kids, they learn these things and they're able to take them back with wherever they go. So instead of arguing and fussing in the classroom all the time, they can maybe understand that that student that has having a bad day has something bad happen in their lives. And so maybe we just need to be quiet. But if we don't learn that at home, if we're not taught that by having it modeled in front of us, sometimes a kid can be fighting and be just on 100. I bring them to my room. I have a little timer. I set the timer on. I say, hey, I'm going to give you 7 to 10 minutes. Don't even say nothing to me. But when that timer goes off, we can have a conversation. 3 minutes. No, 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 no. Take the full time. I have a little lanyard that have all of these exercises on it for them to be able to model breathing, counting, singing, drawing, whatever it takes for you to bring yourself back down. And then we can talk about what it is that you're struggling with. And so what we call that in the counseling realm is building emotional intelligence. We have to teach our kids how to help themselves. So when they can establish a vocabulary built around empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is that I feel something from somebody else. My mom and dad are at home, but Billy doesn't have a dad. So we wonder why he's struggling with the male in the building because, that male is hard on him and he doesn't have a dad at home. So he hates him. Sometimes mothers will teach a son to not necessarily like his father because his father not there. And then that same thing is imposed on other men that could impact their lives, that they won't develop trust with them. And the same thing with the fathers that are raising their kids. They teach their kids not to like their mother. And so then that becomes other trauma that they bring inside the building. But if we can teach them emotional intelligence, that wherever the parents are, they had something going on in their lives that often they couldn't control because of their intergenerational trauma. And so to help our kids overcome that, we have to teach them the words. We have to teach them the actions. We have to let them process their emotions to a point that we can hear them. And I'm not talking to them. I'm listening to them and answering the questions that they're asking. I'm not trying to get in front of them to have them understand what it is that I think that they're saying, because I think that they can clearly state it. And often I restate back to the kids. So let me see. What is it? So what you're saying is to make sure that they're learning the vocabulary and the intelligence of how to process their emotional baggage. And this goes over big in the educational system. We have to allow our children to be able to do this because emotion is a major factor in everything that we do. I mean, driving. You ever get emotional when you're driving down the street and somebody cuts you off? God, why did you get where you're going? You got cramps in your hand because you're squeezing the steering wheel so tight. Or you're driving so close to the car in front of you that as soon as they tap their brake, you almost throwing yourself through the windshield. That's emotion. Somebody cuts in front of you in line. Oh my God, that's the end of the world. But if we're not modeling that for our kids, then we set them up and they become vulnerable to their emotions. And then that's what usually leads to them getting in a fight in a school building, getting in a fight in a community, and getting locked out and getting barred from something, getting suspended from school, or just you feel like you got to get them out of the house because you can't get them to do what it is you want them to do when you haven't necessarily given them an opportunity to be able to share their feelings. And so when we talk about tools and strategies, and this is a serious thing that I get all the time in the educational system. Why no punishment? And I'm grateful that I have the kind of principle that really supports me in terms of, what I try to live and how I try to operate. We'll quickly tell them that we don't punish in this building, we provide consequences. What's the difference? Punishment means that I'm trying to change a behavior without teaching anything. So I think that if I punish you, that's going to correct you. Consequences mean that I'm giving you tools to learn a replacement behavior. So you don't repeat the same thing over and over again, but you come to a point that you start to learn that, maybe I can do this a little differently. And so, that's tough in a household because you're working, you're trying to get dinner, you got to cut the grass. There are 100 million other things that you're doing. But sometimes when there's controversy, when there's struggles, we have to take a pause ourselves, just stop. Again, you're modeling. You're showing them how to deal with stress because they know they done messed up. They know that they shouldn't have done what it is that they did. But when I pause and I give them a minute to reflect on how we can fix this thing, it's a big tool. It's a strong tool because I'm moving from punishment to accountability. I don't want to punish you because punishment, and I'm saying, you look at the statistics, recidivism is a big thing in our society today. These guys go to jail, locked up for 5 years, get out on the street for 6 or 7 months, and then guess what? They're going right back in because they didn't learn anything. So we have a criminal system, and we think of it saying as a criminal system, it's just a place where criminals learn. I used to become so frustrated when I used to go into jail every day. And one thing I hated about going in jail was I hear that gate close behind me. And I heard that gate close because I couldn't move out. If I wanted to just jump up and leave, I couldn't do it. And I could only imagine how somebody had 5 or 6 years had to do. But then when I would find these young men that were calling out that they didn't want to be in a class that particular day, they would call and ask the guard to take them back to their room. I said, your room? A 6x9 box with a metal bed? You're calling that a room? And that's the fallacy that we have in society, that they're ready to accept wherever they at and whatever they do. And so when we pause, when we connect and we give them a place to sort of talk about whatever went on that's honest and open, that they can admit their mistakes, that they can admit what they need to change, then that allows me to give them tools to be able to change the behavior. And that's what we all should be thinking about. And then after that, I'm going to ask the restorative question. Who was affected by what happened? And this was big. I would ask these young men, you shot somebody. What did that mean? Who was affected by this? The guy that I shot. Okay. And we go back to cognitive dissonance, that they have no real thought of reality. So how about the family of the person that you shot? Yeah, well, I mean, you think they might miss the person that you murdered? They might miss the person that you hurt. Did they have children, brothers and sisters? Yeah. And then I'm pausing again. What about your mother? What about your father? They're not really thinking about all the other people that encapsulate in their lives and their situations. And so, we got to help them think through that to be able to get to the next level. If we don't, what were you thinking about when you did that? I don't, well, could you have thought about it? Could you have maybe looked at it in a way to say that, what could I have done differently? Maybe I walked away. Maybe we had never had the confrontation because all I did was bump into him walking down the street. And then thought he had a gun, so I shot him before he shot me. What were you thinking at that time? You weren't thinking. You just responded. And then what do we do to make this right? You got to get that to your kids to have them understand from an accountability perspective that what is it that you do? What is it that you can do to right this situation? Say, I'm sorry. You know how many times I have kids tell me they're sorry in the school, same kid, sometimes be 5 or 6 times the same student. And I always remind them, I said, man, I appreciate that. But how about you not tell me and you show me that you're sorry? I say that works a lot better because when you continually do the same thing over and over again, you're showing me that you're not even learning or you don't care. But when you start showing me, because I'm showing you, right? I'm covering my end of the deal, but I need you to do the same thing. So when we think of having a restorative conversation, I want you to think about we want to build self-esteem and not tear it down because it's easy to shame them and make them feel bad about what they did and turn around and just throw rocks at them. But we need to have them to understand that. And then we can move to this part of the conversation where we talk about repairing together. There were times that when my son was a teenager, a young teenager, my son was uber aggressive. He hated to lose. He hated to get B's. He always wanted to be the top in his class, but he was overly aggressive. And then sometime I had to talk to him. I had to get tough, get in his back pocket to have him understand. But then there was some time that I had to hug him and cry with him. And I know it's easy when we say that, this is going to hurt me more than it hurt you. Yeah, it did. It hurt me. It did. Emotionally, it hurt me when I would try to teach my son something and he couldn't grasp it. But then I had to learn through my pausing and asking these questions to be able to put him in a position to have him understand that tomorrow's a new day. You get another opportunity to try this. I'm not giving up on you. And that's what we don't have with a lot of our young people today, especially our brown and black boys. People have given up on them. People have turned them over to the streets. And then sometimes even have some real expectation that they're going to make something out of themselves. And I'm here to tell you today that that just won't happen. So these are some tools that we're going to talk about, affirming identity. We have to have them understand. And like I think I mentioned earlier, my grandparents always try to challenge me saying I had to be 2-3 times better than people of other cultures. I never believed that. And I never shared that with my son, but would always try to share with my son his level of excellence, the potential of what he could be, the potential of what he could look like if he sort of stayed the course and did the things to make himself not look like everybody else, but look really good and strong in where he was at, as a person. Read with him. I do this with my grandsons now. I've just bought a library of books about Black people. And, my 8-year-old, he actually wrote a book report for me last year, my 8-year-old grandson. And the one thing he said in the book was the guy made him think about himself, how he looked as a person. And that just blessed me in such a way because that's what I want him to be able to identify positive people and aspects that he can model himself after. And we have to have our boys understand this. I work with autism. I work with kids that are emotionally disabled, and I even give them affirmations to make them think how strong they are and how positive they are. It's one kid, he just left the school, but every time I would see him, he would dap me up and he'd tell me his name and say, I am strong. And his mother say, he always says that at home, Mr. Thompson. Why does he say that? And I shared with him why, shared with her why. And she just smiled because he was in a position that he was emotionally disabled and he was in a general educational environment and he struggled. And often people made fun of him. But when he started to build his self-esteem and thinking of the possibilities of him being bigger and better and different, I think that really supported him a lot in terms of what he thought about himself. You got to speak worth into your boys. You got to have them understand that, mama, daddy, we care so much about you that we're not going to let anything happen to you that we can prevent. And we want to teach you how to do the same thing for yourself. It's important. And, this is another big one because I have this same thing with a lot of couples that we work with. Listen to understand, not to respond. Sometimes we don't, we're looking at the clock. We don't have a lot of time. We want them to spit it out, but we got to listen to understand, to hear what they're really saying. And that goes a lot in terms of you guarding what you're allowing your kids to bring into your household, what they're bringing into the school. We actually had a third grader that had a challenge. He was walking around with a steak knife in his pocket, a serrated steak knife pointed down, where he could have done more damage to himself than anybody else. But he said him and 8 other kids were in a group chat. And so the challenge was everybody had to bring a steak knife to school, a knife, not a steak knife, but a knife. And then they had to go back that evening and report about it. So we struggle with this. And in communicating with parents, we often say, well, hey, what can I do to prevent this? How can I help my son get better? So how about not buying him weapons and letting him watch and view things that weaponize him or make him think it's that acceptable to be able to participate with weapons? I mean, it's just small thinking like that, but we got to listen to understand and not respond, because sometimes our kids are telling us information, but we're not really listening to it. Okay, you good. All right, all right. And we just miss what our kid just told us. Could be one of the most dangerous things that would happen to them that next day in school. And so I'm a crisis intervention teacher in an elementary school. Imagine that. Imagine that. I didn't even have this much work when I was in high schools or middle schools. In an elementary school, knives, play guns, vapes, drugs, stealing cars, stealing teachers' cars. Somebody's not listening. Somebody's not hearing. A lot of these kids, they just reaching out for attention. They're attention seekers, but we're not listening to them to find out what it is that they're seeking and they're attempting to do. So back to restoring trust and breaking cycles. Some of us, if we would take a raise of hands, we got spanked. My grandmother used to send me out to the backyard to get my own switch. And I didn't turn out that bad, but I'm just not a big advocate of that today, because I just, I shared this with a mother the other day. I said, how long do you think that whipping is going to last? She said, about 20 minutes. So after that 20 minutes, did we get any change? But we bring that cycle because that's what worked for us, or maybe didn't work for us, but that's what we know. And so we have to acknowledge, like I said, I had to come to the point to understand that my grandparents did the best they could, but did they have the best techniques and style? No, they didn't. And thankfully, what got me through, I had educators, I had teachers that loved me and used to challenge me every day to come to school and do what it was that I was supposed to do. And I didn't go every day, but I did go enough to get a high school diploma. But what I'm saying is that I had to look at how my experience as a young man came through the city, in the inner city of Washington, D.C. How did I move to a place that I was able to foster change in my life? And that comes back to the fact that I had to take an introspective look. And as we started having children, what was missing in my development versus me carrying over what was done to me just because that's what was done. And people say, well, how long you been a parent? I add up all my kids' age. That's how long I've been a parent, because all 3 of them was different. We had 2 girls and 1 boy. My girls, I could just look at them. I could still do that today. I'll look at them and I could look at them the wrong way and they know what I'm feeling some kind of way. They might even cry today as adults. My son would challenge me every step along the way. And so I have mama's boys and 2 daddy's girls. But me and my wife communicate what we learn from both of them, and we take our individual tools and bring them together collectively to have one form of parenting. And so my wife had her trauma. I had my trauma, but we refused to allow that trauma become a part of our children's lives. And this is just being honest. And I'm not saying that we have to be weak, we have to relent, we have to just give them whatever they want, because that's bad. But yet we have to be honest with our kids and we have them understand. And then we have to understand ourselves that we don't know how to do this. So there's another level of understanding that we have to have. And so in my book, I talk about dysfunction. And I had somebody ask me one day, well, why do you say dysfunction? Because if something's not right, it's dysfunctional. But what's the standard? Well, everybody develops some level of standard. For us, it was the Lord. That's what we guided our practices as a parent by, what we saw. And so we all have to find that inner peace to be able to adapt to something, because one thing that I've always come to know, that if I rely on myself to work things out, it's going to be by my opinion. If I open myself up to ourselves up to reading and learning and understanding things that are different than us, or that's more profound to us. And for us, it was a biblical lifestyle that we could be consistent. So if she has an opinion, I have an opinion, but we look at a biblical opinion and we're going to let that guide us. And that's what we often don't do. We just fuss and fight about what it is that we have experienced, what we've gone through. And so that's why we never really break the cycle. So when I think of my story is my story. My story is my wife's story. And so with that being the tools that we operate from, we got to have strategies. We got to have systems. No business could ever be successful without necessarily having a business plan. No football team could ever win a game if they had the greatest defense in the world but had no offense, or vice versa. And so I'm saying the same thing from a parenting perspective, is that we got to start to think about how we want our kids to look. How do we want our family to develop? I have 3 adult kids, and me and my wife like our kids. Our kids like us. And I don't always see that as being a valuable part in a lot of people's lives. So 3 practices. Learn how to have a restorative conversation. Role play. Just work this out. Go home, sit down with your kids and talk about, I noticed you seemed upset earlier. What happened? Let me know. You don't have to talk right now, but I'm going to give you a few minutes. I'm going to come back. We're going to talk about this, 'cause I want to know if I can help you. And it may not come to a resolute today, but I guarantee you, if you consistently do it enough and you come in with a tone and you have a sense of patience and understanding, they'll eventually open up. Daily affirmation ritual. Speak life into our kids. Give them something that they feel like they can hold on to, and especially if it's not for you. When my son moved through his teenage years, and he would just do things that we could not fathom, where did he learn or grab those things from? I would give him the book of Proverbs, 31 days. What is God saying? Who is God talking to? And how does that impact your life? So I'm doing a couple different things there. One, I'm teaching him how to read. 2, I'm asking him to be comprehensive and to be able to think about what it is that he's reading. And then I want him to think about what could he do to have that fit into his sphere. And my son is 36 years old. I believe I still have most of those pages that he wrote, but I can see the qualities in him in terms of being a great stand-up person. Create a family agreement. Sometimes we have to go there to sit down and say, okay, so, dishes has to be washed, grass have to be cut, laundry should be done, we got to vacuum, we got to clean. Everybody gets a role. So we learn how to build our own community. So when someone doesn't do what it is that they're supposed to do, then we can certainly have them understand how their lack of follow through impacts everybody in the family. We got to do better. And so then when they see enough of this, it becomes a part of their lives. And then we'll find them in other environments carrying through to the same thing. That when they're in school, when they're on sports teams, that when they're in public, they're able to say that somebody cut me off. So instead of fussing and fighting about it, they can say, okay, well, you just go ahead and get what you get. This is how our children, especially our boys, are going to learn. So I want you to know that you are enough. You're not alone. There are a lot of us that are struggling and making attempts and struggling to make a difference, not only in our lives, but in the lives of our children, then in the lives of our community, then the lives of our school, our educators, our police. Everybody needs everybody else, and especially with our young Black males. They shouldn't be afraid of policemen. They should see policemen as a part of their community and a need in their community to help them understand the law. They should see our teachers as educators. So the challenge is, will you keep on learning? Will you keep healing? Will you continually try to better yourself and move the things out of your life intergenerationally, the trauma and the things that have impacted you, that you can heal and move beyond those things to be able to keep going? The Bible says the race is not won by the swift, nor the strong, but he that endures. Hey, listen, I pray really right now. I hope this helps somebody. I hope that you come to a level of difference to be able to see some aspect of this that can impact your life, your household, your boys, that we can save some more and get them on a trajectory that they can be successful. Not just athletes. I know a lot of athletes, professional athletes, but they're back home right now and they're trying to find other things to do because the money and the glamour ran out, but yet they didn't have any healing as they went into the process. And so less they come back and they much the same as when they started the process. Craig, that's it, my brother. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
You gave so much, and appreciate the texture of your stories and understanding your values, your vision, and just how you came to be who you are, and just the approaches that come from a place of love, but with boundaries, right? And we need that so much. And so I just want to, I think, open it up to the community. Like we have you here, we have your wisdom, we have your expertise. You are bona fide, certified in all things. So I'm curious for folks who are in the room, like, please lean in, ask the questions. We have Arthur here. I'll answer what I can. I might not be as, prophetic as he, but
Stop it.
we'll see what we'll see what happens. So feel free for those who want to go ahead and jump on in, please do.
Mr. Thompson, it's great to hear you again. You are the guru of restorative practices. I've learned so much from you. But one of my questions would be a lot of our Black and brown boys, because they're raised, like a lot of other kids are raised in single parent households, and the mommy is never home and she comes home at night, when they're all in bed, and the oldest is having to raise the other kids. So where would you start with the restorative practice? Would you start with the oldest one and try to teach some techniques to them to help with it? I mean, what would you do?
It's a collective. I would start with the whole group, and just for a point of transparency, Miss Connolly is retiring this year from 35, 40 years of education in the inner city and was one of my big time partners and supporters in the school that I currently work in to push me on and to drive what I do, a big encourager. But again, you know me, I'm going for the family. I'm going for the whole group. I wanna matter of fact, I'm just looking around because, I was dealing with something today where a brother and sister got into an incident at the school that really was big and reflective on a home. And I had both of them to sit down today independently to reflect on and write it out, what they thought and what they do. And then they come together and hugging and trying to have them understand that you got each other and you got to love each other. You can't let little things become bigger that's going to tear down your family. And mom is working hard. Mom is like trying to do what she got to do, and we appreciate that. But at any point, like I said, my philosophy is love the hell out of. I'm a lover, and that's the best I can do.
And one follow up question too. So, as a community member, like I see a lot of my boys here in our neighborhood, out playing basketball and stuff. How can I be supportive in a restorative way for kids like that out in the community? I mean, would I go out and just watch them play basketball and then like just have some conversations with them, or how can I be supportive of the community?
They playing basketball, get them some water. Walk out there with a case of water and say, "Hey, let's sit down. Let's talk about it. Let's see what it is that we can do together." Because see, Miss Conley, you know that these kids love you. They come back years later looking for you, and that's something that we're sort of void of in a lot of our communities. That we just don't have the propensity to feel like we want to deal with anybody else's kid. And, we that has to change. That has to change. We have to help them see because sometimes nobody's loving them. Nobody's loving these boys. And so just a small gesture, like a bottle of water and being consistent with it. And then, hey, how did y'all do? Who won? Wow. Who's the best player? What are you gonna do to get better? And so we just start the general conversations to lead them into a conversation, but at the same time, we have a larger goal to talk about how we're going to all work together in this game because life often looks like a game to them. So when we can use the parallel to have them understand, they get better.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
Yeah, good evening. Appreciate your service and all you've done. Thank you so much. for this presentation. And I heard you say something about a little bit background growing up in and around Washington, D.C. A couple of things. I guess hope I can get this question out correctly. Here in the district, our mayor has implemented a curfew, and it sounds like I listened to the whole presentation. Sounds like your methods are a little bit different from what the government is suggesting. And then I also heard you talk about systematic racism. So we got a huge challenge that the government and the mayor, the leader of the city, is saying that this needs to be punitive and we need to punish. And then they talking about punishing the parents and all those things. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts about that. I don't know if you had anything other to say other than what you've already said in terms of restorative justice. There's obvious you may not agree with that policy, but the point I think I'm trying to say is that the system, the government, are implementing these punishment. You said this not use punishment, but this use different advocacy ways. So I just wanted to know if you just here maybe you open that up a little bit more.
I'm gonna say I knew this was gonna come up. I guess on some degree I actually hoped that it wouldn't. You laughing at Craig? Because listen, you're right. You're right. I'm different. And I'm different because I know from my experience and then what I've gone through in terms of trying to support and be with other people, punishment does nothing. It does nothing. I think consequences, like if we put young men into jail but taught them skills and gave them abilities to come back to contribute. Like in DC jail, when they would be locked up, I think over 35 days, when they would leave out, they would give them $35 and a pair of sweatpants and a sweatshirt and some flip-flops. So when we think logically, what would that become? So we're talking about a curfew and punishing the parents. Do we ever think about teaching the parents, pulling them together? I've developed a workbook on this particular subject. You know, it's a parenting workbook, and there's 6 points. There's 6 points that I believe: the foundation of restorative parenting, communication and emotional literacy, understanding harm and repair, accountability and restorative tools, boundaries and co-regulations, not only regulations for the kids, and then legacy, liberation, and family agreements. So I think that if we learn how to help people heal, if we help the single mother heal, if we help the father that went through incarceration and maybe he's coming out and he doesn't know how to impact his kids' lives, if we start being a community, then we change the government, right? If we become a community, we change the government because the government will be filled with people that think like how we think because those are people that we're voting for. And so we relinquish our power to a government that's not always thinking the best for us. A lot of people don't know DC is privatized with jails. That's why they basically kicked us out of the jails, but they privatized them. And then they have to pay a penalty when a particular beds aren't filled in the jail. Imagine that. The company that owns the prison said, you got 500 beds. I need 500 beds. If you don't fill those 500 beds, then I'm going to charge you X amount of dollars for each bed that's not full. So guess what the court system is going to do? We don't want that penalty, so we're going to make sure all the beds are full. But I'm saying if we parented and we knew where our kids were at, because I struggle with a young man that shoots somebody else and lives in somebody other house with their parents and the parents not know that they have a gun. I struggle with that. But that's personal, and I know everybody doesn't have that, but yet I think we need to do better as leaders in our households, as leaders in our schools. That's just me. Johnny.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Just to ask you a question. Craig always got nothing but brilliant and breathtaking content. So, Craig, I appreciate you for the production of this. And Mr. Thompson, it's a pleasure just hearing you. I think mine is along the same lines of institutions and systems. I think when I think about restorative anything, two words that come to mind: repair and grace. And like, if you're not focused on repairing, then I'm not sure how restorative works. If you're not focused on the grace or being able to give grace, I'm not sure how this works. So, and I'm taking this away a little bit from family, but I'll combine them together because as you're talking, what comes to mind, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with My Grandmother's Hand, that particular book, which talks a little bit more about what you're talking about from a generational trauma and how it is carried through
in families. So when we think about the punitive practices and correcting our kids, particularly our Black boys, a lot of that really kind of stems from, you know, post-slave syndrome. And we'll leave it there. My specific question is, if we're talking about repairing and grace, one of the things that's really hard right now as parents are struggling to raise their children without even thinking about economics is, how do you support adult families and parents who also need to give grace in terms of their relationship with institutions in general? You talked about school system, you talked about criminal justice, but part of the issue is that from generation to generation, the transgression that's being carried through is the relationship with systems. And so just want to hear a little bit more about what suggestions would you give? I'm not expecting a full answer in the sense that we can solve it tomorrow. So we're not going to do that tonight, but we'd just love to hear what that means, because a lot of times when parents are coming home and they're upset and taking it out on young people, particularly Black boys, it's not just the fact that they messed up, they did something. It's not just the fact that their parents beat them. It's also just the fact that the system beat them. And so the only thing, and the only people and the only control that they have is what they do to and for their kids. So just want to hear a little bit more about, how do you give grace to that, and what does that look like? Thanks for the time.
Well, no, I appreciate that, because the two words that you use are basically a moniker that I wear. When I think of grace, I think of my relationship with my Lord and Savior. So I don't believe that I could be restorative and not use the gift of grace that's been provided to me to be able to give that back to others. And so when I think of the single mothers, when I think of the fathers, when I think of any Black or brown family that's been beat down by a society, it's trying to make every effort to listen to them. And see, this is where I'm different, and I'm in a position to be different in a public school, because I'm not currently serving in any church right now. And I had some folk that sort of queried me about pastoring again, and I tell them that I pastor on Glacier Avenue, and they say, "So what?" No, Bradbury Heights Elementary School. That's my church, because I have the opportunity to inside and outside to really reach the families and to share and to support them, and even some of our employees there. They know that my goal is to always be a resource and to listen and to hear, because I know the pain. See, when people talk to me about, we haven't necessarily been in a system of racism that's been gone so long ago. I remember going to apply for a job one time, and a white guy looked at me and said, "You're not even what we looking for." He just balled my resume up and told me right to my face that I was, only way I could get this job is I agreed to do this, and he was going to give me 30 days to prove it or lose it. I was the first Black photographer for USA Today, the newspaper. Imagine me. I was the first Black photographer that they put out on the street for USA Today. So I've seen it before my own eyes. So I have that compassion. I have that ability. And I see a pastor friend of mine is in here, and thankfully he's not one of these, but the church, we need to do better. We need to do better. And when I talk about being a community builder, that's what I'm talking about. That if you're not comfortable in a church environment, then come see us. But we should always be able to. When I grew up in the DC, and when we had the riots in the city, and we had the National Guard that was in here, guess where everybody in the community went to solve our problems? We went to the church, but we had white people there, we had Muslim people there, we had everybody that lived in that community coming in talking about what we needed to do for our community. Now, as long as it doesn't come into our fence, until it's something really dangerous, we don't want to be that way. And so that's part of the place of dealing with the healing, to have people understand that I'm here. No judgment, no judgment here. Bring it here, and we're going to do the best we can to help you move beyond it. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Hill.
Well, hello there, Mr. Thompson. It is truly a pleasure to be on this line with you all tonight, with all of you. Thank you, Craig. That introduction was just fire tonight. That old music, that old feel. Mr. Thompson, I've only had the pleasure of working with you this year, but in this short space of time, I can already see the connection of God. I just wanted to say, like you, my husband, Gary Hill, who spoke, asked the question earlier, we're bivocational. We're pastors, we're leaders with boots on the ground in the community. And my experiences in education they range. And particularly this year, I've been in from the K to the 8th grade, just around PG County. And what I've seen has been beyond alarming because I've seen it growing. But this year, I saw something that was more heartbreaking than ever because I see it in pre-K and I see it in 8th grade. It's more volatile by 8th grade, but pre-K is the boiling pot. It's starting to percolate in pre-K. And so my question has to do with buy-in because it didn't take long for you to tap into my thinking because I came to you, I gave you 2 words and I talked about consequences and I talked about this thing of what I call what's my C word? I told you that I felt kids were being what is
Coddled.
I said coddled and I talked about consequences. And so you answered my question about consequences. I'm clear on that. The other part of this is just the buy-in. How do we get more buy-in from the educators, from the parents? Because I mean, I'm very new to this. I've taken classes at a DOJ about restorative justice, but your reframing has intrigued me in such a way that says, I want that in my life. I have grandsons. I have a granddaughter, grandchildren, and I am a mother to many nations when I come into the schools. So I want this practice. I want to learn it. So the buy-in, I'm in. I want to learn. And so how to get others to buy in? What do you do in offering this regularly to others?
Well, I'm a graduate of the International Institute of Restorative Practices in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and I'm a certified trainer. And so often what I've done in the past is gone out to organizations and people and really train them in the I want to say the gift, but in the practice of being restorative. It it's an interesting journey, but I can align it to my walk with the Lord because it's all about grace and it's my approach when I'm dealing with teachers. I train teachers in the building. So it's like the buy-in is not instant, but it's like, once they see what they've been doing has no real value, then often a lot of them will come back. And so I try to be evidentiary based to be able to, I like data. I like to be able to look at and saying that I had little Billy John that got rolled up 12 times in this month, and then we moved it down to 6 months. I like to get the examples back from the teachers who are attempting to do this. Often, I have a restorative circle with the teacher that has a conflict with the student to have them come to understand each other. Now, the magic part is trying to dial in the parents, and that's a tough thing, but yet I believe out of the mouths of babes come many truths. So when I can have these kids start to grasp this, and then they can go home and model those things, then I found that, and I had a parent come into a meeting today about her son, and she was real excited that I had been taking time and spending lunches with him. And she says that his communication skills are getting so much better because I'm trying to teach them emotional language, how to advocate for yourself with words instead of violence and anger. I said, and I always tell them, I said, anger is not a strategy. When you mad, you gonna cut up and throw up and do that's not a strategy because that's not gonna get you nowhere. Most times gonna get you in more trouble. But if you learn how to talk about what you're really feeling. So that's the story. We can talk about that, but at some point, you get together a little group, we come out, we sit down and we break down to say, how does this work? I have the curriculum from the organization. We can certainly, move forward with that way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Thompson, I'm going to make sure I honor all our time and make sure you can have dinner and take care of yourself and all the things, But can we give some love to Arthur Thompson for his time, his genius here tonight? Because there's so many gems. I cannot wait to sit with the replay and clips because you already know how I do. So, like, there's going to be a bunch of wonderful resources are going to come, but I am deeply hearted and I can I think what is interesting is we're in an environment that feels punitive all the time for being
Um,
curious, for exploring, for being in places where it's supposed to be a safe space for you, but sometimes the safe space ain't even in your home. Right.
mhm,
And so now you're expecting young people to go to schools. Yes, I'll make sure the replay is shared, but knowing that even school, so where is it that boys and men find safety and then the tools to be able to navigate life and their own journey in a way? And I acknowledge there's a lot of young boys and men who are having more behaviors. We're seeing that across the board, regardless of demographic. But we feel it because that's our kids, that's our sons, that's our king. So we feel it more. It feels more personal. And so some of the young people we have and are dealing with right now have been affected by COVID and has shifted everything. And any and everything that feels normal no longer feels that way. And so I'm grateful that Arthur is continuing to do this work. And there are some other folks who are also standing alongside him, folks who will continue to be curious because we want to love and amplify and educate our boys because we want them to rightfully take their spots in the world as global citizens, leaders, ambassadors, creators, innovative scientists, and more. And I am hopeful that we will do right by them so that they have the tools necessary in this work. This is why these master classes exist, to give us more tools to help and support. There's a lot of folks I'm sure who are like, I can't believe like it's over because I got more stuff I want to say. So Arthur Thompson is like a email, a text, a DM away. We're gonna make sure he sends all of the information my way so I can share it with you all because I hear that folks are wanting more of this. Any closing words, Mr. Thompson?
Hey, man, I appreciate everybody. I appreciate the time. I appreciate to be able to have a voice, man, to be able to share and impart to people. My coworkers in here that I know that are in a struggle with me. Some of my spiritual friends, Dr. Marty down there, Bennett, Sister Hairston. Listen, you guys, you don't know the encouragement that comes out of that. So, like I say, the journey is ongoing. And always remember that I don't want anybody to ever feel like they're alone because I don't have all the keys, but sometime when we can have multiple keys, we can certainly crack the lock together and make a difference. And I'm in the building a community. So I'm saying, let's go.
Awesome, awesome,
Let's
awesome.
go.
Well, thank you, Arthur. Thanks to everybody who was here, whether or not you were here in the room or whether or not you're virtually. I promise, if you are in this room or you were here at some point or not, you're getting all the material. So I shared a workbook courtesy of our Crown Keepers Masterclass. So it's an opportunity for you to have tools that you can use at your own time to to experience some support. I gave you a link to a PDF copy of the Black Boy Joy Blueprint, which it is sitting here. So it is here. And I know you can't see much because I got my blur on, but that is there as well. So you have that as a gift. We will continue. We will share more resources and more that will support you. We will be coming back. I'm looking at my schedule over here. I will be coming back after the summer for more programming. And so thank y'all for y'all time. We sending y'all with love and light. And I hope that you are well. All right. And Arthur, you're showing
My book on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. Yeah, we got to go, but hit me up and we can talk about it. Yeah, look at Marty got his on his phone there. Bless you, sir. We and Miss Alma, she's in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and so hey, that's the whole purpose, man. When the messages become global, the impact becomes that much bigger and better, man. That's the promise. He sent his disciples out to different nations to do their work.
I'm gonna put it in the chat. I'm gonna put it in the chat for y'all because I heard you. Like I was waiting for Arthur to do it.
I'm gonna get there. I'm trying to be there so I can be there like you one day, brother.
And I'll send it. I promise. I will send it to folks as well. I'm gonna wish y'all a good evening. Y'all take care and just holding y'all with tons of love and light. All right.
Bless you. Bless
Good
you.
night.
All right. Good night.